The Eagles head to Baltimore for a potential Super Bowl preview against the Ravens. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are having MVP caliber seasons, while the Eagles showcase an MVP candidate of their own. Both teams are a threat to put up points in an instant, and it should be a thrilling game. Welcome to the Philly Film Room Podcast. I'm Nick Waters, and we have another great preview episode for you this week. And this week's game is going to be a huge preview, a huge matchup for this Eagles team. And it's really a litmus test for this team to see if this team is for real or have they just been beating up on subpar opponents. But having said that, there's a lot to get to in this game, so let's jump into the preview. Looking at this Ravens team and looking at their offense, it is led by offensive coordinator Todd Monken, and it's headlined by quarterback Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, with Zay Flowers emerging as one of the better young wide receivers in the NFL. They currently rank second in points per game, first in yards per game, first in yards per play, and first in EPA per play. So without a doubt, this is going to be the best offense that this Eagles defense has faced. And really, this is going to be the best offense that they've faced, obviously, all year. But since this defense really started to turn around in after their week 5 bye. After that week 5 bye, they faced a lot of teams that were kind of down on their luck. And when they faced the Bengals, it was without T. Higgins on the team. Now, the Bengals went out and put up a number of points on other teams without T. Higgins on the playing field. But still, this is going to be a huge test for this defense. When we look at what the Ravens do on film from a schematic standpoint, they are fourth highest in run rate. That's not a big surprise when you have Lamar Jackson at quarterback and Derrick Henry at running back. They also utilize a lot of 12 and 21 personnel, but they'll also spread you out as well. They're balanced in their use of shotgun and under center plays and pistol as well, and they use a lot of condensed sets and motion to free up their skill players. They love attacking the middle of the field, with 51% of their pass attempts coming between the numbers. They utilize a lot of crossing routes, whether that's deep crossing routes, drag routes over the middle, or other end breakers, and they're extremely balanced in their distribution of targets. It is hard to pin down who is going to get the ball in this offense. Now, when we look at some of the players that this offense has, we have to start with the two-time MVP and Lamar Jackson, and he's having another legit MVP season. And to be honest, he probably will win the award over Saquon, because it's, at the end of the day, the MVP is a quarterback award, but we'll see how this season plays out. If Saquon breaks the rushing record, well, who knows? Maybe Saquon gets that award. But Lamar Jackson is currently leading the NFL in passing yards. He's second in yards per attempt. He's tied for first in passing touchdowns. He's first in EPA per dropback. And he only has 3 interceptions, while also being tied for the lowest turnover-worthy throw rate of any quarterback in the NFL. He's second in rushing attempts among quarterbacks, while ranking first in yards on design runs. He has 191 yards more than the second-place quarterback on design runs. So they utilize Lamar Jackson on the ground a whole lot. He will hang in the pocket and throw unless he is pressured. He's currently 8th in pressured scramble rate, but that drops to 17th on non-pressured attempts. But here's the thing with Lamar. Even when he is pressured, he gets out of it anyways. He has the second lowest sack rate of any quarterback in the NFL. It's just extremely hard to corral this guy. When you think you have him corralled, you don't have him corralled. So it's one of those things where you're just going to get frustrated watching this guy play on Sunday. So just know that going into it, adjust your stress levels accordingly. Now, how do you stop Lamar Jackson? Well, there's 31 other defensive coordinators around the NFL trying to figure out that exact problem as well. Fangio and the Dolphins did play against Lamar last year, and the Ravens smoked the Dolphins. But there was a lot of backups in the game. There was a lot of blown assignments, so I wouldn't read too much into that game and expect that to be the same thing this week. The Eagles' defense is much, much better than that Dolphins team was at that point in the season. And here's the thing. If you're going to beat Lamar Jackson, you have to play with sound coverage on the back end and play with good rush lane integrity up front. But even when you do that, you just got to know that he's probably going to break contain at some point anyways. So matching up on guys and scramble drills is going to be a huge point of emphasis for this coaching staff this week in practice. Looking at some of their other weapons, Derrick Henry on the ground, he, as well as having an MVP caliber season. We're talking about Saquon potentially breaking the rushing record. Derrick Henry's not too far behind Saquon as well. He's currently second in the NFL in rushing yards with 1,325 yards. Although he is averaging 16 less yards per game than Saquon Barkley, the Ravens have played one extra game than the Eagles have. He's currently second in the NFL in yards per attempt at 6.0. Again, that's second to Saquon Barkley. And he's first in the NFL in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. And again, Saquon is a close second in that category. He's tied for first in rushing touchdowns, and he has the third most attempts in the red zone. So when you see the Ravens get to the red zone, I'd expect a heavy dose of Derrick Henry. Lamar Jackson's going to get his work as well. And then they really do spread the ball around to a lot of different targets in the red zone. It's hard to figure out and say, hey, we're going to take this guy away in the red zone. You know who you should try and take away? Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. But again, that's easier said than done. Derrick Henry, I think most people know who he is at this point in time. But if you're new to football, just know that this guy is a bruising runner. He churns out solid gains and he hardly gets stuffed. He wears teams down in the first half, and then he starts breaking long runs in the second half. He leads all running backs in percentage of yards from breakaway runs, so don't be surprised if you see a few explosive runs from Derrick Henry in this game. If you want to stop Derrick Henry, you must gang tackle. He will run over any type of player, whether that's a corner, a safety, a linebacker. He'll run over defensive linemen as well, and you have to be aware of his stiff arm. There's numerous highlights of Derrick Henry stiff arming people into oblivion. So you have to be prepared for that stiff arm. Don't go in there face first, just trying to tackle Derrick Henry because he will shove you to the ground. So when he throws that arm out there, you got to fight the hands and try and get to the body. But in addition to that, another way to try and slow down Derrick Henry is to get into the backfield, make his feet stop. He is a bigger back, so he doesn't have that agility that you see from a guy like Saquon Barkley. He is more of a guy that needs a platform to build up his speed. So if you can get in the backfield and force him to stop his feet and try and make guys miss, well, you have a much better chance. But again, that is all easier said than done. Now, he is not impossible to stop. The Chiefs did hold him to 46 yards in the season opener. That was 3.5 yards per carry. The Bengals, who don't have a very good run defense, as we saw in the game that we played against them, they held Derrick Henry in their second matchup to 68 yards on 4.3 yards per carry. And their first matchup, they held him down pretty well for most of the game. And then in overtime, he hit, I think, like a 40-yard run to set them up for their game winner. Now, the way to stop him is to play good defense, constrict gaps up front, and then be sound in the run fits. If you give him wide open lanes, you are not going to slow this guy down because once he gets rolling, it is hard to stop him. Looking at some of their weapons in the receiving game, though, Zay Flowers is really emerging as one of the better young receivers in the NFL. He's currently 5th in receiving yards. He's tied for 10th in receptions. He's 3rd in yards after catch, and he's 3rd in missed tackles forced. He's targeted underneath a lot as he ranks 76th in average depth of target, but that's not to say that they won't target him further down the field. They just utilize him a lot in the underneath portion of the field. Now, he aligns inside and outside, and they are able to get him a lot of free releases by utilizing him on motions and condensed looks. So pay attention for that. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely at tight end are a dynamic duo, probably the best tight end duo in the NFL. Fantasy-wise, if you own one of these guys, they cannibalize each other, and you probably think that they're not that good. But in real life, they make each other better and make life hard for the defense. Currently, Mark Andrews ranks 18th in tight end targets. Isaiah Likely is 26th in tight end targets, but they both rank 9th and 12th in yards per route run, respectively. But they're both vertical threats, as Mark Andrews ranks 3rd in average depth of target, while Isaiah Likely ranks 6th in average depth of target. Mark Andrews has 6 touchdowns, and that's tied for 2nd among all tight ends. And Likely is a very explosive weapon. He is currently 2nd in yards after catch per reception and 5th in missed tackles forced among tight ends. So either way, both these guys are very hard to contain. Isaiah Likely after the catch, he's a good route runner as well. So is Mark Andrews. He does a really good job stemming to gain leverage and also using his body and his hands at the top of a route to create separation. Now, moving on to the trenches, and we have our weekly question of who is blocking Jalen Carter. And this week, it is going to be Daniel Faalele. He is a mammoth of a human being. He's 6'8", 385 pounds, and he has 35-inch arms. He is a very strong player, but the thing with him is he is pretty slow-footed. So if you can get him in space or get him in situations where he has to redirect and mirror pass rushers, that is where he starts to struggle. That is true when teams are running stunts against him as well. He has a hard time redirecting with those stunts. He can get beat around the edge with speed and quickness, and I think a good way to attack him is to set him up with stutter steps and jab steps to get him to draw his hands out and then knock his hands away and try and get around the edge. When we look at the rest of their offensive line, the other guy that I think is a little bit of a weak point is right tackle Roger Rosengarten. He is a rookie, and he currently ranks 64 out of the 80 qualifying tackles and pressure rate allowed. Looking at their left tackle, Ronnie Stanley, early in his career, he was one of the best left tackles in the NFL. He's dealt with numerous injuries since 2020, ending his 2020 and 2021 seasons early. And then he also dealt with injuries in the 2022 and 2023 seasons, causing him to miss time. And then he was probably playing through injuries at that point in time. But at the end of the day, I think all those injuries have taken some of his athleticism away and made him just slowed him down a little bit. He's currently ranks 44 out of 80 qualifying offensive tackles and pressure rate allowed. So I think he is a guy that the Eagles can take advantage of to a degree. But here's the thing with all these guys. Even if you get pressure, sometimes that's worse because Lamar Jackson just breaks contain and then is able to extend plays and either pick up chunk gains on the ground with his legs, or he's able to extend and hit big plays down the field. So I think they can get some pressure in this game, but keeping Lamar contained is going to be the biggest thing. But looking at some of their other linemen as well, center Tyler Linderbaum is a very good run blocker. He was a high draft pick coming out of college. I think he's in his third year now. He's very quick and agile, and he wins with that quickness. He wins early in the snap. He is undersized, but he plays with really good leverage to compensate, and he's currently 6th in pressure rate allowed among the qualifying centers. Now, we've been talking about week after week who is going to be blocking Jalen Carter, but we got to start looking at who's going to block Milton Williams because he's now up to 3rd in pass rush win rate. And I would anticipate we're going to see an interesting matchup between him and Patrick Mokari, who is the left guard for the Baltimore Ravens. He is allowing one of the lowest pressure rates among all guards this season as well. So I think it's going to be an interesting battle to see what happens on the front and to see how they try and go after and contain Lamar Jackson. Looking at the defensive game plan and what I would do and what I somewhat expect the Eagles to do is, number one, force Lamar to give the ball in the option game. You don't want him having the ball in the read option game. He is just too explosive in space, and he's going to hit you with chunk gains. The fastest way to get down to the Ravens is to let Lamar Jackson do whatever he wants in the run game because he will hit chunk gain after chunk gain. So you have to make sure you are making him to give the ball to the back. Now, it does suck that Derrick Henry is the back that you're telling him to give the ball to. And who knows, maybe we see Keaton Mitchell, who was their stud rookie last year. He hit a number of big plays. He's starting to get back more and more in the mix, and we might finally start to see him get some playing time. So we'll have to see about that. But either way, force Lamar to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry of all people. But on top of that, we've touched up on it, rush lane integrity. That is going to be huge in this game. You got to keep Lamar contained as best as you can. He's going to extend plays, but you got to limit the opportunities that he has. A couple of things when he does start to break contain, if he is rolling out and you are one-on-one with him in space and you're the defensive end, or potentially maybe you're a linebacker that's decided to rotate down, come out of coverage, do not bite on his hesitation, because I've seen so many people on film, they sit there, they bite on his hesitation, they stop their feet, and then he's able to get outside. You got to keep him on your inside shoulder. Do not let him get outside of you. Understand your angles as well. If you're a defensive lineman and you're chasing him, you have to understand, you might have to, if you're chasing him to the sideline, you might have to turn around and start to give a little bit of ground so that he doesn't break your angle. A great example of this was the play against the Bengals where he pretty much got pinned to the sideline, but the defensive tackle didn't take a good angle to keep him contained, and Lamar was able to run outside of him. So understand who you are as an athlete and your athleticism and what angles you need to take to try and keep him contained. And then lastly, do not bite on pump fakes. You must keep your feet on the ground. Let him throw the ball. Don't bite on pump fakes and don't get in the air. But again, all of that is easier said than done in the moment. How many coaches have sat here and probably told their players the same exact thing that I'm talking to you guys about, and it just hardly ever comes to fruition. So we'll have to see how it plays out on Sunday. Now, scramble drills will definitely be practiced this week. They must, when Lamar does break contain, they must find a guy, the nearest guy, and latch onto him. Don't even worry about getting your eyes back to the quarterback. You find the guy and you just face guard him wherever he goes. Don't let Lamar find guys open down the field. On top of that, I would also use a number of simulated pressures. Number one, the line movement and the extra second level rusher coming on a blitz gives you a better chance to get into the backfield to slow down Derrick Henry. And like I said, you want to get him to stop his feet in the backfield. So using sim pressures, you're going to get line movement. You're going to get slants from your defensive line. Hopefully you can cross face of offensive linemen, get some penetration. And then you also have a second level blitzer, whether it's a corner or a linebacker, hopefully coming through free as well. But in addition to that, being able to drop an unexpected player into a throwing window is probably one of the better ways to get Lamar Jackson to have to hold on to the ball. So sim pressures would be something that I would be utilizing a lot. I also wouldn't be afraid of running cover one. I know that sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people. They hear cover one, they think that quarterbacks are going to scramble more. NFL defenses know that quarterbacks look to run against man coverage. So in general, they're a little bit more alerted and heightened to that happening. The pass rush should be alerted to that as well. But then you can also put a player to spy Lamar Jackson. But when you look at this Ravens offense, their completion percentage and yards per attempt are below their averages for all other coverages. So cover one has been a good coverage to slow them down to whatever degree that you can slow down this Ravens offense. Again, use a spy. And also Lamar Jackson's scramble rate against cover one is lower than his average against other coverages. So you might be able to get Lamar to scramble less by running more cover one. When they do run cover three, I would use more spot drop zone principles in cover three. And when the Eagles use spot drop zone principles, they generally play what we saw last week against the Rams. They play with cover three buzz. And again, like we talked about last week, the Rams like to utilize a lot of crossing routes. Cover three buzz puts a safety into one of those hook defender roles, and that allows them to sit there and help take away some of those crossing routes. But in addition to that, by running more spot drop zone principles, what you're doing is getting to your spot on the field, and then you're getting vision back on the quarterback. It is easier to contain the quarterback in the pass game when you have a scrambling quarterback that likes to run. It's easier to contain them when you can get vision back on the quarterback, right? And match coverages, especially match coverage 3, it oftentimes plays out like cover 1, but you don't have the benefit of saying, hey, we're going to dedicate a spy player, right? I guess you could, but that's generally not what happens in match coverages. So I wouldn't run as much match cover 3 this week. I'd run more spot drop zone principles this week. In addition to that, I would also put split safety coverages. And again, we talked, especially on obvious passing downs. And again, we talked about why that is a great way to take away some of their intermediate passing concepts. So that will be it for looking at the Ravens offense. Switching to their defense. Their defense is led by defensive coordinator Zachary Orr, and it's headlined by names like Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, and Nnamdi Madubuike. They're currently 23rd in points per game, 24th in yards per game, 19th in yards per play, and 20th in EPA per play. So their defense is not nearly as good as their offense is. And part of the reason Lamar has so many passing yards is because of the fact that they've been in games where their defense hasn't allowed them to salt away the games. They've been put in situations where they've pushed the Ravens and forced Lamar Jackson to have to pass a little bit more. And Lamar's just been extremely good and efficient in that role. But this Ravens defense, while on the surface, their numbers don't look that great, their run defense is the best in the NFL. They're currently first in yards per carry allowed, second in yards per game, sixth in stuff rate, and first in explosive run rate allowed. Their front is really good against the run. They are tough and physical, and they don't get rooted out of gaps very easily. Their interior defensive linemen, Madubuike and Travis Jones, are really, really good. They do an excellent job of eating double teams and canceling gaps, and their linebackers and secondary do an excellent job fitting off of their defensive linemen in front of them. This is going to be a strength-on-strength matchup, and we're going to learn a lot about this Eagles run attack this week. Is this team for real, or are they just beating up on some bad run defenses? Looking at their pass defense, offenses are passing at the second highest rate in the NFL against this team, partly because of the fact that they are so good in run defense, but also because of the fact that they're not very good on the back end. They're currently 23rd in yards per attempt, 31st in yards per game, and 28th in EPA per pass. One of the biggest issues that they're having on the back end is that their pass rush just isn't very good. They're currently 22nd in pressure rate, but they're 31st in time to pressure. Now, just for comparison, the Eagles have a worse pressure rate by all accounts. They're 25th in pressure rate, but they're 6th in time to pressure. But opposing quarterbacks have the lowest time to throw when facing the Eagles. They are getting the ball out of their hands quickly when they are facing this Philadelphia defense. But the Ravens, on the other hand, are 27th in time to throw among opposing quarterbacks. So they are allowing quarterbacks to hold on to the ball a long time, and also not getting very much pressure when that is happening. It is just very hard to cover on the back end when you're not able to consistently get pressure. But it's not just the pass rush. There's just been a lot of blown coverages or bad DB play overall in general. They've now benched Marcus Williams, who they signed to a big contract a couple of years ago. And if Eagles fans remember, the Eagles were also in the running for Marcus Williams in free agency. But they've currently benched him as of last week, or it might have been the week before. But when I look at this defense on the back end, they do a lot. They're diverse in their coverage scheme. So it tends to be a jack of all, but master of none, right? I do imagine as the season continues to progress, I guess we're in week 13 now. So at a certain point in time, you know, a tiger can't change its stripes. You would think that they would get a little bit better in coverage, but they've just struggled for a large part of this year. Their corner, Brandon Stevens, while he had a better year last year, he was getting attacked a lot in coverage. He's currently 11th highest in targets per game, and he's 90 out of 122 qualifying corners and yards per coverage snap. He struggled to find the ball and when the ball is in the air in coverage. I think this is a matchup that the Eagles can take advantage of. Now, I would do everything that I could to stay out of third and long against this team. When they get to third and long, you see a lot of exotic blitz packages. It's kind of hard to figure out what this defense is going to do when you get to third and long. They'll utilize a lot of blitz packages where they're going to show you one look in the first quarter or in the first half, and they're going to utilize that blitz package, and then they're going to come out in the same exact look and then blitz from the other side later in the game. So it's something that you just got to be cognizant of. I try and stay away from third and long situations, and that's pretty much true of every team that you play, but even more so against this Ravens team. Try and stay out of third and long situations. On third and long, they have the 8th highest blitz rate. That is up from 26th in blitz rate in all situations. They have the 8th highest pressure rate, and that is up from 22nd in all situations. And they have the 2nd highest sack rate, which is up from 13th in all situations. So you got to stay out of third and long against this defense. Looking at some of the players on this defense, though, Roquan Smith is the heart and soul of this defense, but we do need to pay attention to the practice reports this week because he did miss the Chargers game with a hamstring injury. And as we know, hamstring injuries can be very, very tricky. But he makes an impact in all phases of the game, whether it's as a run stopper or in coverage or as a blitzer. He does it all. He is a physical player, whether he's tackling or he's shedding blocks, and he's a high IQ player. Plain and simple. There was a great example of this. There was a play against the Steelers where you can see him pointing out a flood concept as it's happening. He drops to get depth and then rallies to the flat for a physical tackle underneath. He does a really good job in the run game of stacking and playing behind his defensive tackles. He just has a really good feel for where the ball is going to hit. Now, looking at another one of their all-pros on this defense, Kyle Hamilton, and he is always going to get, in Philadelphia, he is always going to get compared to Jordan Davis. And that's going to be a hard comparison for Jordan Davis to live with. But at the end of the day, Kyle Hamilton is a Swiss Army knife. Well, knife seems like too soft of a weapon here. He's more like a Swiss Army machete, or I don't know, something like that. But this dude plays everywhere on defense, whether it's deep safety, he plays in the nickel, he plays the linebacker, he plays on the defensive line. He plays all over the field. You have to know where he is at because he makes an impact at all levels of the game. His arm length is a weapon, whether he is using it to help stack and shed offensive linemen in the run game, to extend for pass breakups. You see his go-go gadget arms just appear out of nowhere to swat passes away, and it helps to give him a better radius when he does need to get up and play physical on opposing weapons. When you look at him as a blitzer, it seems like every single game at some point in time, he's going to blitz and he's going to tip a pass. So if you see Kyle Hamilton blitzing from one side of the field, or you see him lined up from one side of the field and he's creeping up towards the line of scrimmage, and we have an RPO called that way, I would just hand that ball off. Fans can look back to last year where he had a tipped pass on while he was blitzing, he caught it himself and then ran it in for a touchdown. Let's avoid any of that happening. Just don't throw it Kyle Hamilton's way when he's blitzing from that side of the field. He's just a chess piece for this defense. And because of his versatility, it allows you to disguise what the defense is trying to do. Now, looking at their front, Nnamdi Madubuike is probably their best defensive lineman. He is a good run defender and a solid pass rusher. He has a good blend of strength and quickness, and he'll align on the edge as well. I wouldn't say he's an elite pass rusher, though. His pressure rate is currently 28th out of 111 qualifying defensive tackles. His pass rush win rate is 23rd as well. He really wins on a lot of stunts and with effort, getting a lot of cleanup pressures. He doesn't win quick very often. A lot of times he's winning slow. His time to pressure is currently at 3.01 seconds. For comparison, Jalen Carter's time to pressure is 2.54 seconds. So while Madubuike, he did get a big contract extension this past offseason. If you go back and look at him last year, he's very good running stunts, but that's how the majority of his pressures come about. If you can handle and pick up those stunts, they should be okay. I think our offensive linemen should be able to handle Madubuike for most of the game. I would say from their edge rusher, I think Odafe Oweh is probably their best edge rusher. He's a solid pass rusher, and he can win around the edge. He has a more diverse pass rush skill set than any of the edge rushers we saw last week, but he's probably not that big of a threat to Jordan Mailata, and that's who he lines up over the majority of the time. Looking at some of their corners and players on the back end, Marlon Humphrey is definitely by far their best corner, and he's been a good player for a long time, and he is still playing well. He aligns outside and he aligns inside in the slot. He mixes it up in the run game, and there's just better matchups to target in this game, but he will find his way to the ball in zone. And when we see this team in man coverage, I would be trying to go elsewhere. Not to say that if A.J. Brown gets matched up with Marlon Humphrey one-on-one, A.J. Brown can't beat him, but there's just going to be easier access going after Brandon Stephens or potentially even Nate Wiggins, who we'll talk about now. I really liked Nate Wiggins coming out of college, and you can see some of the talent displayed on tape. He has a forced incompletion rate that is 13th out of 122 qualifying corners, and his yards per cover snap is 46 out of 122 qualifying corners. Now, that's not that great, but for rookie corners, it's hard to transition to the NFL as a rookie. For rookie corners, that is pretty good. He has great long speed and closing burst, and I wouldn't throw curls or out routes late to Wiggins' side of the field because he will jump it. But he can be beat, and he's had plenty of rookie moments this year. He often gets his eyes back to the quarterback too quickly, and that's something that I highlighted in his scouting report going into the draft. There's times where he'll play too loose and off coverage or zone coverage. He has bitten on head fakes multiple times this year. And again, he is undersized, so I would try and figure out ways to force him to tackle, whether I am bringing him in and the run fit, or I'm throwing screens to his side, or I'm utilizing drag routes and slants that are attacking and targeting Wiggins and forcing him to tackle. But looking at the offensive game plan on what I would do is, number one, don't get discouraged if this run game is not working early on. You got to stay committed to it. You got to at least make them believe that you're going to run the ball so it can help open up things in the pass game. But I just believe that our offensive line, they can wear people out with their size and what they can do. So as the game goes on, I do expect that they will be able to get a more push on this defensive line, and we can start to see Saquon potentially break a few explosive runs in the second half. Now, like I said, figure out ways to get Wiggins and run support, attack Brandon Stephens in coverage, and then again, stay out of third and long. When you get to second and long, those times you get to second and long, just try and get to third and medium. Don't sit there and try and get it all back on second down because you do not want to be in third and long against this team. Now, something I did notice on film, and 3-by-1 sets, they will jump bubble routes, and the Eagles have been living in their 3-by-1 sets this year. So that's an opportunity for them to throw a little pump and go on the bubble screen. So that's something I'd be looking out for as well to try and get a chunk gain. But in addition to that, you got to stay patient when you do decide to pass against this team. They will give up explosives in the pass game, but the Ravens are fourth in disguise rate. So if you get a different picture than what you were seeing pre-snap, then don't force the ball. Stay patient, get it to your check down or wherever it needs to go, and live to fight another down because you'll be able to hit chunk gains at some point against this passing defense. I liked what they did last week against the Rams, and the Rams, again, were pretty high in disguise rate as well. And we saw Jalen Hurts with one of his lowest average depth of throws last week. So I liked what I liked what the Eagles did against the Rams. They schemed up a lot of easy routes. They moved the pocket numerous times against the Rams. I would keep a lot of those same principles again this week. Now, looking at a score prediction, I really don't know where to go with this one. It's kind of a toss-up for me. I can see it going either way. I could see a couple paths to it being a lower scoring game than we expect. I could see it easily being a higher scoring game as well. But the thing is, both teams do like to run the ball a lot, so we could see a running clock and a shorter game overall with less plays. But both teams have the ability to score in multiple ways. So I do see them ultimately pushing each other in some way, shape, or fashion. Either the Eagles get up and force the Ravens to throw more, or the Ravens get up and force the Eagles to open it up in the pass game. And the Ravens have struggled in pass defense. And with this Eagles offensive line, they should be able to give Jalen Hurts a lot of time to throw. And when you give him a lot of time to throw, things are going to break down on the back end. So because of that, I do see this being a higher scoring game. I don't have a real feel on who wins, so I could go either way with this one. But top to bottom, I do think the Eagles are better in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and I think they have a better secondary. So I think that's going to be enough to help them pull out the victory here. So I got the Eagles 34, Ravens 31. But that will be it for us this week, and that will be it for me for content-wise. Maybe I'll be able to get a video out Saturday, but I am traveling to enemy territory down in Texas for Thanksgiving. I won't be back till Saturday night, so I will have a best bets video out on Sunday morning, so stay tuned to that. But for all the people out there that follow me on Twitter, I will be posting more content on Twitter this week and the lead up to this game. But for everyone else out there, have a happy Thanksgiving. And remember, as always, to like, subscribe, and spread the word. And until next time, go Birds.